Hello and welcome to this Q&A video just for the members of the Indian Classical Guitar Academy. That was a bit of Raag Shivaranjani, and that's a rag that I haven't actually played before, but I did a bit of research and I've heard musicians playing it and I've been in the company of musicians playing it, but I've just never really had a go at it myself before that. But I did a bit of research, and that's where the rag was sort of taking me, just trying to keep in mind one or two things and seeing what wanted to come out naturally from playing in the rules of that rag. It's quite a simple rag in its construction, but it's kind of interesting. It's got a very particular kind of mood, and it kind of seems to send you in a certain direction because there's not as many notes. There's only 5 notes and there's quite big gaps between the notes, and it's quite clear which notes are resting notes and which notes are more colourful notes and others that sound more resolved. So I just thought I'd start off with a bit of a lap with that, and the reason that I started with that was that the first question that I received for this Q&A was from a lovely man called Raj, who's one of the members, and he was just asking about Shivaranjani, and he simply just said, I find it to be very beautiful and haunting raga, so I thought we'd have a look at it. So first of all, this is the beginning question, and then I'll be covering a few more questions as we go on, talking about chikari strings, improvisation, rhythmic awareness, and playing on a single string versus playing on multiple strings. So a few different things. We're going to cover quite a good range of things today. I'm going to try to sort of package it so everything works as a complete whole as well. So all of the different questions hopefully will link in together into something which will help you to understand more about the music, and all the questions are actually quite related to each other. So starting off with just describing this rag a bit, it has 5 notes. And it's just sa, re, komal ga, pa, da, sa. Sa, re, komal ga, which is the flattened third, and then pa, da, sa. So in terms of intervals, that would be first, second, flat third, and 5th, 6th root. And it's the same going down as well. So sa, re, ga, pa, da, sa, da, pa, ga, re, sa. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes per octave, and there's the next octave. So it's actually similar to Raag Bhupali. It's like Bhupali but with komal ga instead of shud ga. So shud ga would give you sa, re, ga, pa, da, sa. So that's the scale of Raag Bhupali, and Bhupali belongs to Kaliantat, so it has some phrasing similarities with Yaman, but it's stripped back down to it being a pentatonic rag. So if you just take Bhupali and flatten the third, make it the komal ga, then you've got the same scale as a kind of starting point. But the classification of the rag fits into the Kafi tat, so it's the Kafi family of rags, and we've covered Rag Kafi in the Essential Techniques course. That's the rag that I start people out with. It's related to the Dorian scale, and it just has particular characteristics such as the sa and the pa being the vadi and samvadi. So the 1st and 5th degrees of the scale, sa and pa being the most accented, strongest notes. So it's very easy to get into the feel of that rag because straight away those are very clear resting points. And then there's particular motions that we come up with in Kafi where we have bends on the komal ga. So a lot of that kind of movement. So there will be some similarities. If we're looking at Raag Shivaranjani, there'll be some connections to Kafi in terms of Kafi tat, and some of the phrasing connections. I think having sa and pa as the vadi and samvadi, that ties it to Kafi. So Shivaranjani, it also has the vadi on sa and pa, and it's got that Kormal Ga. But it's worth noting that you can't do that meaned on Ga that we would normally do in Kafi. So you have to kind of skip that part and treat Ga a bit differently. I don't think Ga will have quite as much weight as it does in Kafi. So when we're coming through this scale, so Raag Shivaranjani, for example, if we're playing Sa Da Sa, those are the kind of neighbouring notes of Sa. So a lot of Sa Da Sa, Sa Da Sa Re Sa, and you're coming into Ga. So there's your Ga, but the next note in the scale is Pa. So it draws a lot of significance towards Pa, because that's like a magnet, it's constantly pulling you into that note. But you must make sure that you don't actually do that meaned from Ma to Ga that you'd think about doing when you're playing Kafi. You'd be using Kormal Ni and Re and Ga. So still building up to Pa, but using that Ma. So you have to make sure in Shivaranjani that you don't play the Kormal Ni and you don't play the Ma. So you don't do that bend on Ga that you've been thinking about all the time when you're playing Kafi. So you have to kind of see how this scale is coming from the same family of rags, but don't mix them up too much. It has to be different from Kafi because of those notes that are missing. So that's going to affect some of the ornamentations and the movements that you can do around the notes. So things that I find myself more attracted to are movements around the So things that I find myself attracted to in this rag are movements around Sa, using Sa Da Sa Re, and stepping into Ga, and lots of movements between the Sa Re Ga Re Sa Re Ga, because that's a nice little run of notes. Those are the only notes that are in this rag that are close together. Everything else is using more bigger gaps. When you go up here, when you're approaching Kormal Ga to Pa and Da, that feels like a lot of space up there in the upper half of the rag, a lot of space. There's a bit more room to maneuver around Da, Sa, Re, Ga, Re, Sa. That feels like more fertile ground for those kind of ornamentations and nice smooth movements between the notes. And coming back down to Pa down there, because Pa is a Vadi note, so we can come to that note and rest on it and sort of play around with the Pa Da Pa. Playing it here on the D string is a nice option. So if we've got Sa, Re, Kormal Ga, Pa, and you've got the same notes there on the G string, fret 2 and 4. So this kind of movement from Pa, Da, Sa, Re, with the bending. And that's quite a nice place to try the extra note in that meaned phrase with the string bend. Bending into Re, and then bending into Kormal Ga. So that's tricky, but if you can do it in this spot, then it will bring a certain expression into the rag that you can't really do that on the other notes because they're too far apart. This is the one part in the rag where instrument is going to allow you to do those kind of ornamentations. So we want to try and seek that. You can also just kind of slide into Re and bend up to Ga. Coming back down to Pa there feels like a nice place to rest. And you can kind of reload the phrase a bit. Sa, Re, Ga, Pa. So there's a few ideas there to explore this region of the scale, but it's going to help if you can get used to certain slides. So the finger positions, I'm really basing myself around Pa there and Sa here. So my index finger is more likely going to be on fret 2 or on fret 7. So even if I'm doing like Pa, Da and sliding into Re, I can do a bend and then come back to Sa with the index finger. Okay, so a bit more sliding will be needed to really link these notes together because of the distance. Moving up from there, maybe moving up and land on Ga a bit more, so you're putting a bit more weight onto Ga rather than playing it as a bend. Actually stating it a bit more plainly sometimes. And then there's Pa, and again that's another Vardi note. So letting that note breathe, and then we're going to be playing around with there's Da, and when you've only got so few notes, then you have to play with ornamentations to keep it interesting. You can't do much just by striking the notes plainly. You know, you have to start using more ornamentations and to get that to come alive. So things like slide, so things like sliding, bending, hammer-ons, pull-offs. Just kind of contrasting Sa, Re, Ga, Da, Pa, Sa, Re, Ga, Da, Da, Pa. Just tiny things that change it. We'll go straight to Pa, and then Da. So there's only so much you can do. You go Sa, Re, Ga, Pa, Sa, Re, Ga, Da, Pa, Sa, Re, Ga, Pa, Da, Pa. You know, there's not a lot that you can do, but you can change the ornamentation and just try to alternate those phrasing choices that you have to keep it alive and keep it interesting. And then you're building up to Sa. Using the Chikari strings, letting them ring out, that's particularly significant and effective when you're building up to that high Sa. So it's not the easiest bend to do in terms of that distance. That's a tone and a half bend. It's quite difficult to get that. But it's a good place to try it because the string is fairly loose at that point, so it's a good place to try that larger bend. But but it's probably going to take you quite close to the edge of the fretboard. It's quite a big one. And just really tune in with the drone, so you can hear that it's really in tune, and hold the bend and strike the drone strings and just try to get it so they're really in tune. And then exploring a bit up above that, there's Re. And a lot of my students notice that when I do a bend, if I'm teaching you, then I might teach you a bend. I'll get you just to go, just a sort of straight movement up and down. But if I just let myself play, then I do a lot of smaller bends or little quicker bends around the main bend. So there'll be the main one going up and down, but there'll be sort of smaller bends. Those are very difficult to teach, those kind of movements, because you kind of just have to get the sound and the feel for it. But it's basically like doing, sometimes it's a small version of that bend very quickly and slightly smaller distance covered before the main bend. So just a little kind of flick of the tail, and then the slow bend. Or sometimes I'm touching a different note, like up here, Ga. And that's a very quick sort of movement between that Ga and Re at the top. That's a more measured way of practicing it to really get it in place. It's very difficult to practice that and to get it right. Because you're just going through the gears, these tiny little incremental movements, fairly big movement to get to Re, and then tiny movement to get to Ga, because you're up here, the string is so tight, it's a very small movement. You can get similar kind of phrasing just with the hammer on and small bend. So it's really about hearing it. If you can hear that, then you can kind of tune your hand in if you're hearing the notes really clearly in your mind. It's a bit easier without plucking it, but you've really got to hear it and practice simpler bends, but building up to it, that's the kind of thing where you're really zooming in to see if you can hear the phrase in your mind and kind of get the fluidity into your hand while keeping the string very, very steady with very good solid technique. So that's something that takes a while to build up to, but little details like that on the guitar will make a rag like this come to life a bit more and feel that you've got things to explore and ways to, you know, express the mood of the rag with only so few notes, and actually make each note a different zone that you can treat differently and experiment with. So a lot of the phrasing comes from what sounds beautiful with that rag, but it's also going to be influenced by the instrument and what's more doable on the instrument, and particular parts of the instrument in the register where it kind of opens up more and gives you the most that the instrument is offering you. So it's a combination of the adaptation to the instrument and, you know, and then the rag and the mood of the rag and what the rag seems to evoke. but you do also have to make sure that you're using the instrument to its strengths as well. So I hope that helps just to explore that Raag and to open it up a little bit. Thanks very much, Raj, for recommending that one. If you want to start one of these courses, you can buy them individually or you can subscribe monthly to access all of them. For subscribers, there will be new content every month, including live streams where we can answer your personal questions and go into more detail about applying this material. So far we've covered Raag Yaman, Raag Bageshri, Jog, Hamsadwani, Kafi and Raag Malkons, and there's much more to come. This body of work is a culmination of the 18 years experience I have as a guitar teacher, combined with the knowledge acquired through studying the sitar directly, and then adapting that material using the guitar techniques that suit this style best. To create these courses and gather the most authentic material possible, I work closely with other Indian classical musicians such as Manish Pingle and Gurdane Riot. I'd like to give a special thanks to my guru Roopa Panesar, who has guided me in the creation of these courses. Much of the material has been adapted directly from my training with her. Also Shakir Khan, my guru, who's been inspiring me immensely and continues to shape how I approach the instrument and this incredible world of Indian classical music.